Hi BookTube! I'm here today to talk about books to read when you want to be sick. Yes, you heard that right. I've seen a lot of videos that are about books to read when you are sick, comforting reads, and nostalgic reads. But this is, in fact, a video about books that will make you feel sick to your stomach because of the imagery in them. So why would you read books that make you sick? I really don't have an answer for that. Maybe because you want to get out of a social obligation and you feel bad lying, so you actually want to make yourself feel physically sick. Maybe you're a sadist, or maybe you're just dead inside and these things don't affect you at all. So, a word of warning, I'm going to be using an opening from a rather grotesque text to act as a warning here. This is from the Conte de l'Attrayement. God grant that the reader, emboldened, and having become at present as fierce as what he is reading, find without loss of bearings his way, his wild and treacherous passage through the desolate swamps of these somber, poison-soaked pages. For unless he should bring to his reading a rigorous logic and a sustained mental effort, at least as strong as his distrust, the lethal fumes of this book shall dissolve his soul as water does sugar. So please do not watch further if you're easily offended by gross imagery, and please keep watching if you want to be offended by gross imagery. So 4 books. First one, The Painted Bird by Jerzy Kosinski, which is controversial in its own rights. It's about a young gypsy boy who is abandoned by his parents and left to wander Eastern Europe during World War II. It's an account of all the horrible things that he witnesses, and I'll be reading a passage from it. With a single kick, the miller got the woman out of his way, and with a rapid movement, such as women use to gouge out the rotten spots while peeling potatoes, he plunged the spoon into one of the boy's eyes and twisted it. The eye sprang out of his face like a yolk from a broken egg, and rolled down the miller's hand onto the floor. The plowboy howled and shrieked, but the miller's hold kept him pinned against the wall. Then the blood-covered spoon plunged into the other eye, which sprang out even faster. For a moment the eye rested on the boy's cheek, as if uncertain what to do next. Then it finally tumbled down his shirt onto the floor. It all happened in a moment. I could not believe what I had seen. Something like a glimmer of hope crossed my mind that the gouged eyes could be put back where they belonged. The miller's wife was screaming wildly. She rushed to the adjoining room and woke up her children, who also started crying in terror. The plowboy screamed and then grew silent, covering his face with his hands. Rivulets of blood seeped through his fingers down his arms, dripping slowly on his shirt and trousers. The miller, still enraged, pushed him toward the window as though unaware that the youth was blind. The boy stumbled, cried out, and nearly knocked over a table. The miller grabbed him by the shoulders, opened the door with his foot, and kicked him out. The boy yelled again, stumbled through the doorway, and fell down in the yard. The dogs started barking, though they did not know what had happened. The eyeballs lay on the floor. I walked around them, catching their steady stare. The cats timidly moved out into the middle of the room and began to play with the eyes, as if they were balls of thread. Their own pupils narrowed to slits from the light of the oil lamp. The cats rolled the eyes around, sniffed them, licked them, and passed them to one another gently with their padded paws. Now it seemed that the eyes were staring at me from every corner of the room, as though they had acquired a new life and motion of their own. I watched them with fascination. If the miller had not been there, I myself would have taken them. Surely they could still see. I would keep them in my pocket and take them out when needed, placing them over my own. Then I would see twice as much, maybe even more. Perhaps I could attach them to the back of my head, and they would tell me, though I was not quite certain how, what went on behind me. Better still, I could leave the eyes somewhere, and they would tell me later what happened during my absence. Maybe the eyes had no intentions of serving anyone. They could easily escape from the cats and roll out of the door. They could wander over the fields, lakes, and woods, viewing everything about them, free as birds released from a trap. They would no longer die since they were free, and being small they could easily hide in various places and watch people in secret. Excited, I decided to close the door quietly and capture the eyes. The miller, evidently annoyed by the cat's play, kicked the animals away, and squashed the eyeballs with his heavy boots. Something popped under his thick sole. A marvelous mirror which could reflect the whole world was broken. There remained on the floor only a crushed bit of jelly. I felt a terrible sense of loss. So yeah, squishing eyeballs and popping them out of people's heads. Lots of fun. We'll get even grosser with number 2. This is from the Chants de MELD, or the Songs of MELD, by the Comte de la Trémont. This is a poetic novel that follows MELD, who is evil incarnate. He rages against God, morality, and humanity. It's a book which chooses for its topics things that are despicable and disgusting, such as mines of lice taking over the world, the joys of drinking the blood of prepubescent boys, and mathematics, for some reason. So, here's a passage from that. As for me, if I may be permitted to add a few words to this hymn of glorification, I will say that I have had a grave built, 40 square leagues in area, and of a corresponding depth. There, in its foul virginity, lies a living mine of lice. It fills the bottom of the pit, and thence it spreads out in wide, thick veins in all directions. This is how I built this mine. I pulled a female louse out of the hair of man. I slept with it for 3 consecutive nights. Then I threw it into the pit. Destiny saw to it that human fecundation, which would have been impossible in other similar cases, was successful this time. And after a few days, thousands of monsters crawling in a compact mass of matter first saw the light of day. This hideous mass became more and more immense in time, acquiring the liquid property of mercury, and branched out into several groups which at the moment sustain themselves by eating one another, the birth rate being higher than the mortality rate. Unless I throw them as fodder, a newborn bastard whose mother wished its death, or the arm of some young girl, which I cut off during the night after drugging her with chloroform. Every 15 years the generations of lice which live off men diminish noticeably, and infallibly predict the approaching era of their complete destruction. For man, more intelligent than his enemy, has managed to conquer him. Then, with an infernal spade which increases my strength, I extract blocks of lice from this inexhaustible mine, break them up with axe blows, and transport them into the arteries of cities. There they dissolve on contact with human temperature, as in the first days of their formation in the winding galleries of the underground mine, they dig down into the gravel and spread like little streams into the dwelling places of men like malign spirits. There's actually more explicit passages in MELD, but they're not fit for me to read aloud on my channel. But that was just a small taste of the Chants de MELD. Next up is the NBody Problem by Tony Burgess, a Canadian author, which is about zombies. But in this novel, zombies more than anything have created a waste disposal problem. The zombies don't exactly die. The body parts keep moving, no matter how small you chop them up. And as a result, rampant paranoia and hypochondria among the survivors has allowed for one very psychotic man to take advantage of them all. Our main character ends up as a stump, literally a head and half a body with no limbs, and he's being kept alive because he can't die. And he gets raped repeatedly. It also includes a scene where someone inserts a lot of dismembered penises into his bowels, which are of course still moving, so he lifts his shirt up and you can see stuff moving. But that was only a small passage, and I decided to read this passage. What I think I have is, it's a cancer that coats in the abdominal cavity. It doesn't enter the lymphatic system, not for a while. I hope it hasn't anyway. It starts like a coating on the spleen, a woman's shawl, and it triggers peritoneal fluid to build up, ascites. The bells thicken, and the cancer cells are released into the fluid-like spores from a bumped fungus. They drape the liver, they drape the colon, the stomach lining. The fluid accommodates us by separating the packed bodies, creating living space for itself. And the more this cancer silt builds, the thicker and heavier the mucus becomes. Eventually, the spleen sloughs off its new deadly skin and releases it as a transparent tube, a hovering jellyfish in a dark, thick sea. It is a new part of you. It is a distinct creature looking to live in you. Your body recognizes it, even in the insensate mash of glue and fatted lungs. It is awake to this new thing, the birth of this tube. And your body trusts its origin. It is a child of the spleen. It is your tissue. It is splendid and structured and hungry. So the body feeds it. That's how you die. Your body is so desperate that this tube survived that it takes all the blood and oxygen away from what you really are and feeds this new child, this lovely tube-shaped wonder. It flattens and expands and floats. It is free. It is alone in you. It is wonderful. And then you die. Not of cancer. The cancer is just starlight. The cancer is a maker. You die of a neglected liver, abandoned to necrotize like an old city. You are ruins. So I'm cutting it out. I'm waiting for why. I look around for a place to do this. I can't walk far. I walk bow-legged to a derelict car by the dumpster. I will sit with my feet on the ground and my belly hanging. That way when we cut the base, it will drain straight away. The cut will have to be big enough for his hand to get in. He's going to have to pull this out. Number 4, Naked Lunch by William S. Burroughs. This is a drug-induced nightmare, both for the writer and the reader. It is scene after scene of rape and pedophilia and bug people, but I don't want to read any of those passages because I don't really want to push the limits of my YouTube channel by reading that kind of stuff out loud. So instead, I'm going to read a graphic description of a certain disease. Yes. The disease in short arm hath a gimmick for going places, unlike certain unfortunate viruses who are fated to languish unconsummate in the guts of a tick or a jungle mosquito, or the saliva of a dying jackal slobbering silver under the desert moon. And after an initial lesion at the point of infection, the disease passes to the lymph glands of the groin, which swell and burst in suppurating fissures, drain for days, months, years, a purulent, stringy discharge streaked with blood and putrid lymph. Elephantitis of the genitals is a frequent complication, and cases of gangrene have been recorded where the amputation in medio of the patient from the waist down was indicated, but hardly worthwhile. Women usually suffer secondary infection of the anus. Males who resign themselves up for passive intercourse to infected partners, like weak and soon-to-be purple-assed baboons, may also nourish a little stranger. Initial proctitis and the inevitable purulent discharge, which may pass unnoticed in the sure, is followed by stricture of the rectum requiring intervention of an apple core or its surgical equivalent, lest the unfortunate patient be reduced to fart and shit in his teeth, giving rise to a stubborn case of halitosis and unpopularity with all sexes, ages, and conditions of Homo sapiens. In fact, a blind bugger was deserted by his seeing-eye police dog Copper at heart. Until quite recently, there was no satisfactory treatment. Treatment is symptomatic, which means in the trade there is none. Now, many cases yield to intensive therapy with areomycin, terramycin, and some of the newer molds. So if that's just a description of disease, you can imagine the other scenes, and probably best not to do that. I want to give an honorable mention here to 120 Days of Sodom by the Marquis de Sade, which I looked for a passage that I would feel comfortable reading to you aloud here on my channel, but I couldn't. So go search it out for yourself. That's it. That's my 4 books that will make you sick to your stomach. Let me know what is the grossest book you've ever read, and thank you for watching.